Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to the Biblical Perspective for Saturday, October the 23rd, 2021. We're going to look at something that kind of goes along with one of the Ten Commandments we've been looking at in our survey of that beautiful, beautiful law of God handed down to us that used to be posted everywhere. We used to say it was the very basis of our civil and judicial system. And now we hardly know of anyone who can recite all 10 commandments by heart. So, what do we have going on this week? Something else that's dealing with one of those commandments that has a lot to do with how we raise our children. On the front page of the Epoch Times, we read this article entitled 17 State Attorneys General Demand Department of Justice Cease Attempt to Silence Parents. What's going on here? Well, you may have read a lot about this, or you may have even seen articles or news clips about it. It goes on to say this: a coalition of 17 state attorneys general is demanding that the Department of Justice immediately rescind a recent memo they say would, quote, chill lawful dissent by parents voiced during local school board meetings. My first my first thought right off the top of my head is, what's the Department of Justice doing concerned with local school board meetings? They seem to have their hands full with other issues, don't they? The highest murder escalade in years, the highest, a year in which literally we had so much crime happening in some of our larger cities that they became like war zones. And school board meetings, this is what the Department of Justice is concerned about. Listen, the article goes on. The DOJ memo, which has been the center of much criticism since its October 4th release, directs the FBI to work with state and local governments to address an alleged, quote, disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence, end quote, against teachers and school leaders. It came shortly after the National School Boards Association urged the Biden administration to invoke, listen to this, counterterrorism laws to handle angry mobs of parents seeking to hold school officials accountable for the teaching of the Marxist critical race theory and for imposing COVID-19 restrictions on their children. In a letter sent to President Joe Biden and Attorney General Merrick Garland on October the 18th, the attorneys general argued that the memo does not appear, hang on while I turn the page, the memo does not appear to be based on facts, but on a flawed NSBA narrative, which describes disruptions at school board meetings as violent threats akin to domestic terrorism. Now, I've been following the news accounts of some of these, but I haven't seen a one that you could describe as domestic terrorism. Although there were some parents who were quite concerned about what was happening with their children and did not seem to be getting any response and any legitimate response from their school boards, and they were rightfully upset. Listen as the article goes on. The vast majority of incidents that NSBA cites involved disruptive and disorderly conduct rather than threats, the letter reads. In fact, in no known instance has there been anything like the burning, looting, police assaults, vandalism, and other criminal activity that occurred back in the summer of 2020. The letter was referring, of course, to riots involving anarcho communist groups like Antifa and Marxist group Black Lives Matter. Actual threats and violence towards school administrators, board members, teachers, or staff are rare, almost non existent, the attorneys general wrote, noting that there are already sufficient criminal and civil remedies available without the need for FBI to intervene in what is quintessentially a local issue. Yes, I would think anytime there's a local school board incident, there's a local police force and sheriff's department that's fully equipped and ready to handle it. Listen, it says they further stated that the Department of Justice memo is likely intimidating to parents, who in many cases are for the first time exercising their First Amendment rights to speak in a public forum. Quote, we as a country should celebrate their participation in our system of self-government, not silence them by accusing them of domestic terrorism and threaten them with the prospect of the FBI knocking on their door to investigate their activity, the letter reads. Now, the letter was written by Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita and co-signed by the attorneys general of several states. And as it names all of these, one named in that group is our own Attorney General here in South Carolina. The letter comes as school board organizations in at least a dozen states have distanced themselves from the NSBA, citing disagreement over the way it's characterized concerned parents. And many of those states, also listed in the article, have said, no, we want our parents to come and participate and air their grievances and let it be known and let's let the system work. Well, this comes on the heels of one of the most disturbing things I think I have ever seen. And that's the incident at the Loudoun County School Board in Virginia, which has found itself to be a battleground between leftist ideologues and the parents who are disturbed at what's happening to their children. In one particular incident, uh, a concerned father who voiced his opinion with a great deal of passion in the school board meeting was hauled away, was charged with various crimes, which should be misdemeanors, yet there was a demand that he be jailed, that he be treated like a felon and all this stuff. They labeled him as everything from a domestic terrorist to some kind of right-wing villain. But no mainstream news media outlets seemed to indicate that there was any reason for this man to be upset. As you go back and look at the film, of course he was upset, but when you find out why, you'll be more angry. I was more angry at the school board than anyone else. Matter of fact, what's interesting is this man's grievance is one that I think most parents would be more than concerned with, not just for this particular family, but the families of all the students that go to this particular school system. What had taken place was this man was speaking on behalf of his own daughter, because the folks in the school board, in talking about new transgender rules for allowing transgender students to go to whatever bathroom they wanted to go, were really touting the idea that they'd had no incidents whatsoever, nothing to worry about letting students who are, for example, biological males who now claim they are females to go into the female restrooms. We haven't had any problem with that. And of course, you could flip that scenario as well. Well, this parent had had it as long as he could, and he spoke up. Why? Because not only had there been an incident, but the incident occurred with his own daughter, who was sexually assaulted by a biological male claiming to be a female, wearing a skirt to school, entering the girl's bathroom, and then assaulting his daughter. Not only was he not happy about the way this was being handled, or rather not being handled, but when they took this child out of his daughter's school, they responded by putting, I don't want to say him, her, I don't know what kind of pronouns I'm supposed to use at this point, but they took this child and put the child in another school where the same incident occurred with another female student. So you've got two incidents of sexual assault. The second one, of course, should never have happened, because immediately after the first one, that student should have been separated, pulled out of school, put in juvenile detention because they'd committed a crime. But instead, we are too busy trying to be accommodating to every kind of leftist dogma. And all of a sudden, we've got parents who are naturally concerned about it showing up at school board meetings, and they're being shut down. The folks running the school board meetings now claiming, oh, we are just victims. We're being assaulted by these terrorists showing up at the school board meetings. No, these are concerned parents who want their voices to be heard, because the whole basis of our school system is that you, as a school board, serve at the behest of your parents, the voters who put you in office. When they are unhappy, they should have the recourse to take you out of that office if you're not doing a good job. But today we're being told by folks, especially from our own White House administration, that our children are no longer ours. That's right. Your children are no longer yours. They belong to the state. And it is the state's responsibility to educate them. And these children belong to the school system, and you have no say in this. In fact, if you as a parent disagree with the way we're handling things, you're more likely to be threatened with losing custody of your own children from this new dogmatic state that says, we know the best for your kids. It's none of your business. When you go back to the Bible, that's not what we have. And it does go along with what we've been looking at in the Ten Commandments this week. I want to read to you from Ephesians chapter 6, where it begins by saying, children, obey your parents in the Lord, because this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with the promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may have a long life in the land. So the Apostle Paul here in Ephesians chapter 6 is quoting from the Ten Commandments. And he's saying, children, obey your parents in the Lord. This is right. It's the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother, because there's a promise that comes along with that. He mentions no responsibility for the state, or for that matter, even the church, to be responsible for the education of children. It's all in the lap of the parents. Now, if the parents want to delegate some of that authority and that teaching to others, it's up to them, but ultimately it's their responsibility. And we see that happening in the very next verse, where it says, fathers, do not stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So once again, the family unit is supposed to reign supreme. And parents, we are responsible for the education of our children. Now, if you decide to do that through a public school system, then you should be able to keep your nose right in the middle of it, as we did when our children went to school, even though they part of the time went to a public school system, part to a private system. We knew our teachers. We knew every teacher by name. We looked at assignments. We wanted to look at the textbooks. We wanted to see what was being taught. We were in charge of our children's education, and we looked at those teachers as stewards of the responsibility we were handing over to them. If they were doing something we didn't like, we would voice our opinion. Why? Because it's our responsibility. We are the parents. Friends, we need to take that responsibility back. Because you see, these educators aren't going to come and say, oh, wow, your 30-year-old, your 40-year-old doesn't have their head screwed on straight. They didn't get it right in school. They were taught something that messed them up. That's not my problem. My goodness. I had 30 kids in a class. You think that it's up to me to take responsibility for what happened to your child as an adult because you say they didn't get educated properly in my school? Oh, give me a break. I mean, that's right. It's not their problem. Parents, it's ours. Grandparents, it's ours. And we need to take this responsibility seriously. So wherever your children go to school, listen, the options are huge out there today. Within our own church, we've got kids who are in public schools, some in public STEM schools and charter schools. We have some who are doing school virtually. They do public school virtually, or they do private school virtually. We have others that are in private schools, some private schools that are Christian based, some secular based, and everything in between. Some are homeschooled by their parents at home, and usually in conglomeration with some other parents who are, homeschooling their children as well. So, there are all kinds of ways to educate our children, but ultimately, where does the buck stop? With the parents. So listen, friends, don't abdicate your responsibility. Don't give it up to others who would love to say and demand that you just surrender all knowledge of everything going on in the classroom with your kids. No, instead, stand up for your rights as a parent. Participate in the education of your children. Be right there with them, help them along, and make sure that you follow what the scripture says you're supposed to do. Bring your children up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. Well, God bless you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Let's stay on target, stay on task, watching over our kids, because, friends, there's a lot of danger out there in the school systems today. You do not want to just toss your children to the wolves. You need to find out what's being taught, what's being said, and participate in the education of those school children. Some of you may be called by God to go volunteer at your school, take a job at your school, run for your local school board. Hey, don't miss the boat. God may be calling right now. God bless you. I'll see you again tomorrow as we finish up our series, our sermon series on the Ten Commandments. So don't miss it. I'll see you then.